Okay, we will go to number G, labor market information.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you, board members. As I think board members know, the EDD releases its monthly data late in the month after the 20th as a rule. So the latest information that we have from EDD is April. So the April will form the heart of today's report. Let's see, let me get this to full screen. The good news is that unemployment has continued to decline, both in the region and across the state and country. The unemployment rate, the preliminary unemployment rate in April for the metropolitan statistical area, which includes both Santa Clara County and San Benito County, was 2.2%, down from a revised 2.5% the month before, that is to say in March. The county's unemployment rate was 2.1%, down from 2.5% as well. And the state and national unemployment rates were correspondingly about a 0.5 percentage point lower. The MSA added about 9,300 jobs for the month, taking it up to 1,154,000 jobs, with leisure and hospitality leading the employment increase for the month, up 4,400 jobs, most of them coming in the food services and drinking places subsector. Professional and business services added 1,300 jobs, all of them in the professional, scientific, and technical services sector. Durable goods manufacturing added 1,100 jobs, and government, construction, financial activities also added, excuse me, jobs for the month. For the year, the MSA recognized a 5.7% increase in jobs. That's about 62,500. For the year, leisure and hospitality led the way as well, as it continued to recover from the depths of the pandemic, adding 24,500 jobs for the year, most of them in food services and drinking places. Professional and business services added 12,500 jobs, most of them in the professional, scientific, and technical services subsector. Educational and health services added 6,500 jobs, most of them in healthcare and social assistance. Manufacturing added 5,600 jobs, information 4,300, transportation and utilities 3,000, and construction added 2,600 jobs for the year. As you can see, both at the MSA and at the county levels, the unemployment rate has maintained a more or less steady downward trend since the shock of sudden and extreme unemployment in the first months of the pandemic back in April of 2020. The unemployment rate in the county is now actually lower than it was prior to the pandemic. It's at 2.1% as measured against the 2.5% back in February of 2020 before the pandemic took us all over. For all intents and purposes, the unemployment rate of 2.1% is practically what's referred to as a full employment labor market. If you take a look at Santa Clara County residents, an estimated 1,040,000 of them were in the labor force in April. That is a figure that's fairly consistent with where the labor force has been since about July of 2021. Between the beginning of the pandemic and July of last year, the labor force regularly oscillated between about 1,030,000 people and about 1 million people. We're still about 15,000 people shy of the labor force prior to the pandemic. How much of that is permanent and how much of that people still continuing to sit on the sidelines is at the moment unclear, although we think that some of that decline in the overall labor force is a reflection of people leaving the county. The estimated number of people unemployed is at its lowest level since well before the pandemic at just shy of 22,000. As you can see, back in February of 2020, before the pandemic, when the unemployment rate was about 2.5%, it was still about 27,000 people unemployed. That very small number of people unemployed is, on the face of it, good news. However, it does have significant implications for employers in the region, as it does around the country. Nationally, the labor force faces these kinds of challenges. There are about 11.5 million job openings in April 2022, and there were about 5.5 million unemployed persons. The labor force participation rate was still not at the level that it was prior to the pandemic. The fractions of a percentage point are actually fairly significant in terms of numbers of people. And nationally, employers are facing the phenomenon of more Americans nearing retirement age than are entering working age. So this aging of the population has a corollary effect of essentially reducing over time the number of people available to work. And the lack and cost of childcare is also a national phenomenon that is challenging the labor force. If we take a look at what it looks like here in Santa Clara County compared to the nation, we're seeing very similar kinds of phenomena. Here in the county, there were 28% more posted job openings in April of this year than in April of last year. So the number of job openings increased significantly over the year. At the same time, the number of people looking for work, the number of people nominally unemployed, fell by 50%. So there were about half as many people looking for work who were county residents in April 2022 than there were in April 2021. In fact, less than half, because the number, as I just mentioned, was 22,000 in April of this year. It was about 50,000 in April of 2021. The labor force participation rate, unlike the country, it remains about the same here in this county. However, not only is the local population aging, it is also declining. The county actually is estimated to have lost some population since the April 2020 census. And of course, the lack and cost of childcare is also a pressing challenge to people who are trying to work or thinking of working or thinking of going back into the labor force, but are choosing not to because it doesn't net out for them. This is a different kind of illustration of the labor gap, if you will, for the county. The blue bars on this, the blue columns are the representation of the number of people who are estimated to be unemployed in the county. These are county residents. And the orange bars is a measure of the number of unique job postings. That is to say, as close as you can get to the actual number of jobs open. As you can see, in April of 2020, right there at the start of the pandemic, when the labor market collapsed, there were 3 times as many unemployed people as there were job openings, approximately. A year later, there was still more unemployed people than there were job openings, although the difference between the two, the gap was significantly smaller. That gap remained until September of this last year. And in October, the number of job openings and the number of unemployed people more or less equalized. And then since October, the balance has been moving in the opposite direction, with an increasing gap between the number of job openings and the number of unemployed people, but in a direction very different than it was from April 2020 to September of 2021, with far fewer unemployed people and far more job postings. So why do we still have people unemployed if there are so many more job openings than unemployed people? One reason is the mismatch between the skills of the people who are unemployed and the skills that employers are looking for. What you see on the screen are the top specialized skills that are appearing in job postings. And as you can see, most of them are fairly sophisticated technical skills. And then if we take a look at the top common skills, we're also seeing that by and large, the frequency of the skills, of common skills mentioned in job postings remains significantly greater in most instances than those skills appear in the profiles of people who are looking for work. So there continues to be a skills mismatch. You recall pre-pandemic that there were already conversations about skills mismatch in the labor market. We are seeing that that kind of gap in skills available among folks looking for work and skills demanded by employers still quite separate in terms of their availability. If we take a look then at the county's demographics, we see in fairly straightforward terms why there are frequent references to certain communities within Santa Clara County who are underrepresented in better jobs. If we take a look at jobs where the median wage is at or above $25.31 an hour, we see that the Hispanic Latino community is significantly underrepresented. Although they make up about a quarter of the population in Santa Clara County, they make up only about 16% of the people in occupations that pay above 25 and 31 an hour. The same is true, or something similar is true for women in the community. Why 25 and 31 cents an hour? Oops, excuse me. Why, I've gone back too far. I have. So as we move forward, we see that the reverse is true in occupations that pay below that $25.31 an hour threshold, where the Hispanic Latino community is significantly overrepresented. So is the Black and African American community. And again, women are also overrepresented in lower paying jobs, occupations that pay less than a median wage of $25.31 an hour. Why 2531? It's a measure that we use for identifying quality in-demand jobs. It is the county's stipulated living wage for jobs that don't carry health or retirement benefits. And so we use that simply as a threshold for analyzing the marketplace. If we look at in-demand quality occupations, which are occupations not only that are at or above that median wage, that county living wage of $25.31 an hour, but also experience more than 100 openings on average every year. So they are available in some substance and are projected to experience at least 4% growth between 2021 and 2024. Those are the benchmarks that we use to identify in-demand quality occupations in this county. We see that the Hispanic Latino community is even less represented than it is in quality occupations that pay at or above 25.31 an hour at the median level generally. So it's the county adjusts its living wage every year at the middle of the year. So after July 1, the county's living wage will be moving up about $1.50 an hour to $26.96 for our benchmark. It's also moving up across all the three categories, as you can see. And we anticipate, therefore, that there will likely be some impact in terms of how residents are distributed demographically across quality in-demand occupations when we run the next analysis in early August of this year. At the same time that we have all the things that we've seen going on in the labor market that I've just shared with you, one of the phenomena that's impacted the economy, of course, is inflation, with the consumer price index remaining above 8%, which is the highest inflation rates that the country has seen in 40 years. And this has resulted in a cutback in consumer spending. In a recent study conducted by Breeze Insurance Services, they found that 88% of consumers have cut back spending, with 73% reporting reducing their spending in restaurants and takeout food, 63% in consumer spending, 57% in groceries, and so on and so forth. The Fed, as we know, sorry, before I go there, this is in part a reflection of a real earnings decline. Real average hourly earnings, because of the very high rate of inflation, have actually decreased. They decreased for the month, so they decreased about a 0.5 percentage point from April to May, and they have decreased for the year. They decreased 3% between May of 21 and May of 2022. This is in spite of increases in wages that have been happening as employers have responded to the pandemic and the difficulty of finding labor. So although on the face of it, it looks like wages have been increasing, in fact, because of the very high rates of inflation, wages have been declining over the course of the second half of the pandemic. So what's in store? Well, yesterday, the Fed raised its federal funds rate by 0.75 percentage points. That's the highest increase in 28 years, and puts the rate now at about 1.5%. Why is this important? It's because the Fed is trying to be more aggressive in combating inflation, and most economists expect that one result is likely to be a recession next year. If that in fact comes to pass, the recession will carry with it a potential for widespread layoffs. As in all recessions, lower income individuals are going to be especially vulnerable, and so are younger people and retirees. And of course, work2future's priority populations count at least two of those groups of people: low income, especially low income individuals with additional barriers to employment, and youth. So we are going to need to be keeping a very close eye on how the economy continues to develop over the course of the next half year or so, I think. And I think we're also going to need to continue to grapple with how we serve low-income individuals, especially low-income individuals with additional barriers to employment, and youth in a way that doesn't trap them in lower-paying jobs, where the impact of inflation is greatest. I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Any questions of Lawrence?
Jack has his hand up.
Yeah, Jack, go.
Yeah, Lawrence, I just want to clarify one thing. The demographic statistics are somewhat unclear because of the way they've been put together. And so I just would like everybody to kind of realize that when we talk about the Asian population, there's actually two populations. There's one that's generally highly successful, and there's another group that includes some West Asian people as well as Southeast Asian people who are not successful. And I'm hopeful that these statistics will eventually be broken down to give us a better picture of what's actually happening in the community.
Yeah, thank you, Jack, for pointing that out. It's actually a piece of information that we're trying to see if we can localize, but I'll just share with the board, following up on Jack's comments, two things. One, I'll remind the board that a few years ago we commissioned a study taking a look at income inequality here in the community, and among the communities that our consultants identified as being on the low end and particularly challenged was the Southeast Asian immigrant community. And that in this community is a part of the overall Asian community that does not, as a rule, that finds it harder as a rule to move into higher paying jobs and to actually attain economic mobility, if you will. That twins with a recent report just released that we've been looking at that tells us that of the major racial groupings that the Census Bureau uses, Asians experience two things. One, they are unemployed for longer periods of time than any other group. So even though overall they experience less unemployment than most other groups, when they do become unemployed, they tend to be unemployed for longer periods of time than people from the other major communities. And then the other thing that we've been looking at is a Pew Research study that found that, again, among the major racial groups, economic inequality or income inequality was actually greatest in that very large, diverse Asian community. It on the one hand, it has a very high, one of the highest median incomes, but it also has the lowest median incomes in this kind of peculiar non sequitur, if you will. The challenge for us is all of these studies are nationwide studies, and it's taking some effort on our part to see if we can actually localize the data in some fashion. So if we are, we'll be able to share that picture with folks in the future. So thank you for pointing that out, Jay.